Hey, welcome back to the CTO Advisor coverage of Dell Tech World 2019. A lot of customer interviews this year. We have Scott Miller, Technical Infrastructure Engineer at American Fidelity. This show is sponsored by Big Switch, in which we're going to talk about Dell networking. So let's dig in. First off, how long have you been a Big Switch customer?
Since about 2013.
Before Big Switch, what was your primary platform?
So before Big Switch, so if you step back a little further than that, during that time period, we had the opportunity to purchase a new campus for our company.
Okay.
As such, we had the opportunity to build a new data center from scratch.
That's fun.
At our previous headquarters site, that data center was very old, and at the time in which we were starting this process, we were kind of a collapsed core, Cisco 6500, kind of everything. You know, we used the FEXs, you know, kind of as our top of rack switches, etc.
So it was typical environment that most CCIEs would walk into day after day. That good old trusty 6500 at the core.
Yes.
Yeah. 2013, we're at the beginning of the big public cloud movement. We're learning a little bit from the hyperscalers, not a lot. Mm-hmm. Talk to us about that decision process to go with open network solution, because that's 2013.
It was new to us as well.
Yeah.
So we have had a long-standing good relationship with Dell, mm-hmm. And they're the ones who, you know, we went to them, kind of told them, you know, what we were looking for, and basically wanted to know what's new.
Right.
We kind of have had over the last 5 years a pretty top-down decision to try and be an innovator, you know, in our fields, and so we wanted to do something new, something that was a little more, you know, non-traditional.
Right.
So that's kind of where we started learning more about open networking, the other people who were playing in the field, you know, Cisco ACI.
So you were talking to all the big names,
yes.
The Aristas, the Ciscos. I'm assuming Juniper. You know, you got you're getting RFP answers from everyone.
Sure.
And Dell, while, again, extremely respectable platform, not a lot of people knew about it, mm-hmm. but you guys are coming with not just Dell networking, which if you went with Dell networking by itself, which would be a big win, big mm-hmm. label win for Dell, you went with the open network solution of bringing Big Switch, a different operating system than the manufacturer. Tell us about some of the kind of conversations. Was there resistance internally to the idea, and was it like, oh wow, let's do this, let's open arms? Sounds like a plan.
So we were absolutely open to doing something different. Part of it is that as we wanted to do something new, we knew that there was going to be a learning curve, that we would be on the edge of, we don't fully understand probably everything around any of these solutions from the beginning. It's going to take some time to really get comfortable around the solutions. The thing with the Big Switch solution was that it was much more straightforward as far as like how it operated. Through the demos and through the talks with them, it was obvious that that was going to be a solution that wouldn't require like just constant care and feeding, of maintaining, of having all these people trying to keep it running, you know, like a top, as smooth as it could. So that was one of the things that really appealed to us. When we entered the POC with Big Switch, I mean, by the end of the day, we were passing packets, which is something that we were pretty shocked about.
So let's talk about like day two.
Okay.
You've deployed the solution. What was the either big aha or big moment of day two operations?
Well, one of the immediate things that kind of strikes you is that, you know, coming from the 6500 platform and going into Big Switch, is that you can do everything in a GUI, which is just alone for the common.
Wait, hold on. You have some networking guys like cursing at us through the video. Well, thou shalt never GUI. But that is, especially in the day of cloud, where you don't want to spend a whole lot of intellectual thought on managing your environment and thinking, what was that one command to do?
Absolutely.
And what context of the OS do I have to be in to make it happen?
Yeah.
It's kind of nice. It's a nice crutch.
For sure. And as far as analytics, to get the data in front of you, to see the actual state of the network, you can't beat it. So instead of having to go into, remembering all your very specific commands to go in and check kind of the health of, different links, check for errors, etc., you can do these sort of things through the GUI, which is great.
All right, so let's talk about more day two. Let's talk about support.
Okay.
One of the big kind of, I think, mental roadblocks that I hear a lot when it comes to disaggregated network operating system from Big Switch and then hardware from Dell. When there's a problem, who do I call? Like, who do you guys call when there's a problem?
Typically, we reach out straight to Big Switch. If they're very knowledgeable with the platform, I think Dell is probably the main vendor that they typically usually support. And if we've ever had any issues related to ONI, which I can only ever think of one, it was found pretty quickly in the platform. So for us, it's Big Switch has provided pretty good support on that. If there's anything that's ever that's just completely crazy and we need escalation from that, we usually reach out to our SEs at Dell, kind of let them know. But escalation has typically never been a problem for us.
So more day two stuff, because these are a lot of questions that I get. It's operations perspective. When I'm in the Cisco or Juniper world, or even in the Dell NAS world, there's like a whole ecosystem around tooling for performance management, network monitoring, etc. Talk about kind of that life of living in a ONI world of having to manage your network from a practical perspective. What is this physical underlay doing versus what is this config doing? How do I do configuration management, etc.? What tools are you using to manage your network?
The Big Switch overlays all of that completely, so you don't really have to have an interaction with ONI other than the original provisioning of that switch. So all the interaction that you do is going to be straight through pretty much Big Switch. If you're doing, if you have to debug something,
right,
and you're in the CLI, then yes, you may end up, somewhere in the ONI realm to look at things and make sure that environment is okay. Since we've been using the last couple of years, it's rare that we have to get into the weeds that deeply. There have been a few instances, but the engineers have never had a problem with it.
Wow. So talk to me about we'll dip a little bit into the management realm when it comes to your job. How has your job changed now versus pre-Big Switch?
So before, things were very hands-on. Anytime we had a new host that came online, there's quite a lot of work that had to be done to be prepped to get that set up. It's not the case as anymore. It's very easy to script these changes. Big Switch has some very well done automation pieces,
right,
so you can connect into the vCenter APIs, and basically it can discover a new host when it comes online, and it can provision the appropriate VLANs as needed.
So we haven't talked about that integration at all. Big Switch just made a big announcement, Dell and Big Switch OEM agreement. They signed a new OEM agreement. You can buy, I'm assuming, Big Switch directly from Dell now, and the purchasing is a lot cleaner. But let's talk about kind of that integration. VMware and Dell have had this story, VMware, Dell better together. Obviously, there's great vCenter integration with the VxRail, VxRack platform, etc. But then, VMware has this small product called NSX. You might have heard of it. So let's talk about Big Switch and NSX integration. What have been like the niceties or even challenges of running Big Switch?
So the one big thing that we used NSX for from the beginning was to stretch our layer 2 boundaries. So with our old data center, we wanted to go ahead and start moving things to the new data center real time. So to be able to stretch that boundary to vMotion straight into the new data center without interrupting production.
This is their bread and butter. VMware sells this as their HCX on the back end product side. You need to move from one data center to another data center. Complex enough migration as it is. If you can stretch layer 2 from one data center to another data center, makes migration a lot simpler.
Absolutely.
You don't have to worry about re-IPing your apps, hardwire IP addresses. None of that become a challenge. You just have to vMotion the piece is over. So
exactly.
NSX is a good solution for that.
Exactly. So that was kind of one of the things that really kind of caught our eye with the solution at NSX from the beginning. It's morphed into quite another things now, especially now that we've completed our migration and we're working out of our new data center. So we have a second data center as well that we use mostly for disaster recovery, but we have internet lines, ISP connections there, so we're able to use both of them simultaneously with NSX based on where a VM lives. It can egress its local ESG and vice versa. So NSX being the overlay, there are some complications when it comes to just troubleshooting as far as, it's hard to get that insight as to kind of the packet flows and where things are going to go. Especially when things, whether it's inter-host traffic or inter-host traffic, and how those packets flow across the network. There it's encapsulated via XLAN, so it can be difficult to understand how those flows are going to function.
Which is, as we move into kind of this era of cloud, becomes a challenge, as the underlay is just continually abstracted away. NSX and competing solutions have this challenge of this observability or visibility challenge of understanding what's going on, what path in the network is a packet truly taking. Becomes a much more difficult problem.
Correct. So that's where some of these integrations come in. So Big Switch can integrate with NSX, and so it you can do like path traces, so it pulls that information straight from the NSX manager. It understands all the networks I've defined, and so from Big Switch you can see all the NSX networks there as well. And so if you go so far as to go the other way, you could also see the Big Switch information in NSX.
That's pretty tight integration. I think when I first got briefed by Big Switch a couple of years ago, and we're talking about NSX, I'm like, well, how are you guys going to continue to compete with VMware and NSX? I'm like, no, you have the story wrong. It's not a compete. It's you need both solutions. You need a underlay. You need some intelligence for that underlay in NSX if you embrace that overlay for your VM to VM traffic for NSX. That makes sense.
Absolutely. So we use it heavily for our microsegmentation environment. But we also have what we would call a flat network as well. So all of that exists just within BCF. That would be their bread and butter. Different tenants, different segments, etc., to kind of achieve kind of what you could do in NSX, but without some of those complexities. All these different segments don't have to be firewalled off from each other. So we're not doing any of that.
And when
it makes it a lot more simple.
And when I talk to the NSX team and I ask, well, how does NSX help me with my physical network? You guys have been around for a while. I'm in any environment. I have stuff that can't be virtualized.
Sure.
So it's hardwired into a physical port, but I want that NSX type intelligence around that port. And I can't get that. NSX does nothing for me. Does Big Switch offer you any operational advantages from either overlay perspective or et cetera for those legacy workloads that can't be, or those not even legacy workloads that just doesn't make sense to virtualize? They have to go into a physical port.
Yeah, so we still have plenty of use for that kind of thing. So one of the things we do like about the Big Switch environment is that when we do have these physical things that we have to connect, if we have networks that have to be defined, it's very easy to just set those ports up for that. We don't have to run cables all over the data center. Everything's virtual, so any port can be a part of any network.
It's one switch.
Yes.
The advantage of one switch.
Yes. So the day-to-day management to support that becomes much easier.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many projects have been delayed because I needed to run a physical wire from one side of the data center to another one, just so I can be on the right network. Like that is cloud-like in capability.
Yes.
So the ability to software define your network, any port on your network, super important. I wish, and I see why VMware hasn't gone into this route. I want NSX on a physical switch. Well, what if I just gave you one big switch, and you can do whatever you want with it?
Absolutely.
So I really enjoyed, Scott, you coming on the program and offering some input. Really appreciate you coming in and having a sit-down discussion with me. We really thank Big Switch for sponsoring this episode of the CTO Dose. Talk to you next episode. Be sure to follow the channel for more coverage of Dell Technologies World 2019.